What's it mean to solve for variable?
Wait, me?
Yeah, anyway.
Find for whatever.
Find what it's equal to, right? Get it by itself, isolate it, get it on one side of the equal sign by itself, right? That's what it means to solve for a variable. Well, now I'm going to give you a problem with just a bunch of variables, and I'm going to say solve for this variable. And you do the same steps, okay? But now you have a bunch of variables, and I just say solve for this one. Okay? It's the same thing as if we had one variable like we did before. So when we solve for a specific variable, like I said, it's the same thing as solving regular equations. We identify the variable you want to solve for, x, y, z, a, b, something like that, okay? We always simplify the equation. We get rid of any fractions, parentheses, like terms we have. That shortens the equation up, right? Makes it shorter. And then we isolate the variable. We undo the operation so that we can get the variable by itself or all of the variables on the same side of the equal sign. Okay? And then we solve it. We just get it by itself. We undo multiplication or division, something like that, to solve for the variable. So, for example, this top one here, see, this is just a bunch of different variables, t, c, and d, also a 5 mixed in there. And I say solve for d. That means which variable am I going to get by itself? D, right? I need to get d by itself. So I mark the variable I want to solve for, that's d. I undo the operations that connect the d to the other variables. So what is connecting the d to all these variables? What operation? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. It's all multiplication, right? Just by each other, that's all multiplication. So since that's one big multiplication problem, I can just undo all that multiplication by division. And since I want to leave the d right where it is, I'm going to divide by what's left. I'm going to divide by 5c squared because those would divide out and those would divide out. And I'd be left with just the variable d on that side. What I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So I get t divided by 5c squared equals d. Okay. Now, I know last year when we did this chapter, a lot of people were really like, that's it? Like, they don't have an answer. That is your answer, right? All you're doing is you're getting the variable by itself. Once you get the variable by itself, that's your answer. That's what that variable is equal to. In this case, I don't tell you what t or c or anything is equal to. I could, but I don't. Okay? You're just getting the variable by itself. This is good for like when you guys take like physics and I think some chemistry, you know, you have to rearrange these equations like for distance and time and acceleration and velocity. Okay? You have to rearrange these equations for different variables. That's what this is most commonly used for. So let's look at this second one down here. I want to solve for n. That means I want to get this variable by itself. There's nothing to simplify. There's no parentheses. There's no fractions, nothing like that. So I just need to get this n by itself. Again, everything's multiplication here. So to undo that, I just use its opposite, which is division. So what am I going to divide by here to leave n there? 3m squared, right? 3m squared because those are going to divide out to leave me with just m. So then I divide by 3m squared on this side. So I get n is equal to r divided by 3m squared. I think right now on the test I have like 4 or 5 of the problems very similar to this towards the very end. It just says, here's an equation, solve for this variable. You have to get that variable by itself. Okay. So in this one, I have an equation with 2 variables here, u and w. If I say solve for w, okay, I want to get w by itself, but w is on both sides of the equal sign right now. So how do I fix that problem since they're on both sides of the equal sign? Yeah, I need to put them together. I need to get them on the same side of the equal sign. Okay, and this is what we did in the last chapter. I can either add w over here, or I can add 5w over here to get them together. And we like to do it so we keep the variables positive. So which one of those ways can I do it so I keep those variables positive? Add 1w to both sides, or add 5w to both sides? Yeah, add the 5w. So if I add it to this side of the equal sign, I have to add it to this side of the equal sign. I still have 5u over here. I have negative 1w plus 5w is positive 4w equals, I still have this u here, and then negative 5 plus 5 is 0, which is what I wanted because that goes away. Again, I'm trying to get the variable w by itself. Remember, this 4 is going to be the last thing I undo because remember we call that like the family. It's the closest thing to it. That's the last thing we undo. So I need to move this 5u to the other side. Just like if that was the number, let's say it was the number 25, I would subtract 25 from both sides, right? Because it's a positive 25. But now it's just a 5u, so I just have to subtract 5u from both sides. Just treat it as a number. Think of this as another number. If it was 10, I would subtract 10 from both sides. Okay? But it's just 5u, so I need to subtract 5u from both sides of the equal sign. Okay? That goes away. I'm left with 4w over here. I have 1u minus 5u. 1 minus 5, negative 4 u. And finally, my last step, I need to undo this multiplication by 4 because I'm trying to get w by itself. The opposite of that is dividing by 4. Do that to both sides. I'm just left with w. I have negative 4 divided by positive 4. I could do that. That's just negative 1. And then I still have the u. So I get negative 1u. And remember, we don't write that 1 usually in front of there. There's a negative there. You kind of can't see it. Okay. We just can write that negative. Okay. So that we solved that equation for u. We had to simplify. We had to get our variables together on one side of the equal sign. Once we did that, it was the same as what we've been doing. Right. Let's look at the same equation, and let's say we wanted to solve for u. Okay, we wanted to solve for the variable u. I do the same thing. I start getting the u's together. I either need to move the 5u over, or I need to move the 1u over. It's going to keep the variables positive if I move the 1u over. So I can do that by subtracting 1u from both sides of the equal sign. 5u minus 1u is 4u. And remember, you have to keep the sign that's in front of the variable with it, so that's a minus 5w. Again, trying to get u by itself, so I need to undo that minus w. So I will add w to both sides. So leave me with 4u equals negative 4w, because negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. And just like before, divide both sides by 4. And u is negative w, because negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 4. Questions on those? All right. On a scratch sheet of paper, and if you need one, you can come take one of mine from up here. I would like you to try number 5 here. I want you to solve the variable a. Now, this is a little different than the ones we've been doing. I want you to try it yourself here. So let's first, if you're stuck right off the bat. So a, I'm subtracting 8, and I'm dividing all of that by 7. Remember when we had those other equations? We called them like enemies and acquaintances, the things that affect everyone. We have to get rid of the things that affect everyone first. What is affecting everyone on the right side of the equal sign here?
7.
Yeah, that division by 7. I need to get rid of that before I can undo that subtraction. Okay. Right, so I need to do the opposite of dividing by 7, and I need to multiply both sides of this equal sign by 7. Okay. So 7 times b is just 7b. I just bunched those together. Now we're going to talk about in just a second. A lot of people did this first step right on the quiz, but then they distributed this 7 with the a minus 8. That's not a bad idea, but the reason we multiplied this by 7 was so that these would cancel each other and divide out. So before I get the chance to distribute, I need to go ahead and cancel those out. Because that's the reason I multiplied by 7. That's the reason I picked multiplication by 7. So then what I'm left with over here is a minus 8. That makes sense? Well, now just to get a by itself, what's the only thing keeping a from being by itself? Yeah, the minus 8. So I do the opposite of that to both sides. I will add 8 to both sides of the equal sign. So I get 7b plus 8 equals a. Now, can I combine these two things?
No.
Why? They're not like terms, right? The other one doesn't have a b. I can't combine those, so I just leave it just like it is. I have a by itself. That's the answer. Okay. Yes?
Is there any way that we would get 1 for 1?
Say it one more time. Now. Okay. And remember, we want to always simplify first. We want to get rid of any parentheses, fractions, those sorts of things. So at least simplify that right-hand side first, and then see if you can get a by itself in that equation. So hopefully your first step is to get rid of those parentheses and to simplify. And to do that, we have to distribute that 7. And you get something like that. 7 times a is 7a. 7 times minus 3 or negative 3, negative 21. At this point, it looks a lot like problems we were solving before. Trying to get a by itself, so what's the next thing I need to undo here? Right, I need to undo that subtraction of 21, so I will add 21 to both sides of the equal sign. I get b plus 21. Again, I can't add those because they're not like terms, so I'll just leave it as that. Equals 7a. Now, this is the kind of tricky, the last part. To undo that multiplication by 7 that's happening here to a, I need to divide both sides by 7, right? So if I divide by 7 here, those will divide out to leave me with just a. But what I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. Since I divided everything on this side by 7, I have to divide everything on this side by 7. Now, that's the same thing as writing it like this. Okay, dividing everything on that side. But you can just write it all divided by 7. So I'm left with b plus 21, all divided by 7, is equal to a. I've solved for a. A is by itself. Okay. Yes?
So can we still write it 3 plus b?
Yes. But b is divided by 7. I'll show you the equivalent way to do that. Yes. I can see how you got that. Right. So if you divide both of these by 7, you would have b divided by 7 plus 3. Right? Because 21 divided by 7 is 3. That makes sense? Or you can leave it like this. Now, let's go back. I think that's the best way to solve this one. But let's say there's another way to solve it. You don't have to write this down, but let's look at this other way to solve it here. If I want to undo, again, I want to get rid of these parentheses, so I need to simplify right here. This is 7 times all this, right? 7 times a minus 3. So if I undo that 7 times, I can divide both sides by 7 here. Because when I do that, those would divide out, and I divide this side by 7. So I get b divided by 7 equals a minus 3. Right? And then just to get a by itself at that point, I would add 3, and I get b divided by 7 plus 3 equals a. So that went away. And that's the same thing as what we got before. It might not look like it immediately, but what we got before was this, b plus 21 over 7. Well, that's the same thing as b divided by 7 plus 21 divided by 7. I just broke up this fraction. Since it's all divided by 7, I can write it with both denominators of 7. Well, this I can't simplify, b divided by 7, but this I can simplify. 21 divided by 7 is 3. So see, that's the same thing as what we got before. So whatever way you wrote it is correct. Okay, if you wrote it this way or this way, but that's just 2 different ways you can solve this problem. A lot of these problems, there's multiple ways you can solve it. Okay. Questions on that? I got 2 more here I think I want to look at. Okay. All right, try this one, number 7. These are the last 2 we're going to talk about today. Again, anytime we can get rid of parentheses and fractions, we're going to do that. So we can get rid of these parentheses by distributing this 2. So I get a equals 2b plus 6h minus 4h. Because that minus 4h is just tacked on at the end. And again, anytime we can combine like terms, we can make this problem shorter. I want to look for like terms on the left-hand side. There's nothing there. Like terms on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Do I have any like terms? Yep, 6h and minus 4h. Those are like terms, so I can subtract them. If I have 6h, I take away 4h. I now have 2h. So now I just have one variable of h left, which is good. I'm trying to get this by itself. Remember, this 2 with this h is going to be the last thing I have to undo, right? That's always the last thing, that multiplication by 2. That's always the last thing I have to undo. So I need to move this 2b over to the other side. Just like if that was the number 20. If it was positive 20, I would subtract 20 from both sides, right? Well, now it's just 2 times b. So to move it to the other side, since it's positive, I would just subtract 2b from both sides of the equal sign. Just like if it was a number. It just happens to have a variable with it. A minus 2b equals positive 2h. Yeah. Finally, I want to undo that multiplication by 2. To get h by itself, so I just have to divide both sides by 2. I divide everything on the right-hand side by 2, so that means I have to divide everything on the left-hand side by 2. Again, you can write it like that, or you can write it like that, right? Either way, it's the same thing. Okay. So, divide by 2. So the answer would be a minus 2b divided by 2 equals h. If you would have wrote it like this, You could simplify a little further. You can't simplify a divided by 2, but you can simplify negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. Oops. So you could simplify it to that if you wanted to. I'll accept this answer though, right? Because that fraction divided by 2 is the same thing as just breaking up that fraction. A divided by 2, negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So those are the same thing. Last one today is this A divided by L equals W. Now this is actually the equation area equals length times width, right? It's just been rearranged. I want to get L by itself.
Oh, this.
Okay. Anytime I can get rid of fractions or parentheses, I'm going to do that. I want to get rid of this fraction, this division by L. Right? What's the opposite of dividing by L? Be multiplying by L. Right? That way I get rid of this fraction, because when I do that, those will cancel with each other and just leave me with A. And this leaves me with W times L over here. Right? That way I just made this problem so there's no fraction. Finally, I'm trying to get L by itself. What am I doing to L right here? Multiplying by W. So to undo a multiplication by W, divide both sides by W. Those divide out, and A divided by W equals L. Okay. Again, I know some people want to get, so they just have an answer. It's L equals 5, something like this. But in these problems, we're just rearranging the equations. You're just showing me that you can do algebra steps to get a variable by itself. Okay? Once you get a variable by itself, that's what your answer is.